This seems to be the year for celebrating bicentennials, 200th birthdays. We've done several of those with our Hometown Cable, our little corner program. Today, a cool day on the 10th day of August, 1999. We're in Chateaugay.
Right.
Yeah, you haven't been home till you've come to Chateaugay. Olin, how are you?
Very good this morning, very good.
So great to be here with Olin Cook, who invited us down here. Calvin did the parade a while ago, and hopefully before you finish this program, you will see the parade. What day was the parade?
Last Sunday.
It was.
Sunday. The 20-something.
Yeah, whatever, in there.
23rd.
Anyway,
22nd.
I was camping up on the St. Lawrence River, and Calvin was here, and we were all over the place, and I knew if we just piece it together, we'd get some information about this great community.
Well, we're very proud of our parade. It was one of the biggest we've had in I don't know when. Did a great job, everyone.
I'm sure a lot of people who travel through this area and have never had a chance to stop and say hello and meet the people don't realize what a wonderful history you have here.
Oh, we have quite a long history. Of course, this was the 200th anniversary of our founding. The first people came here were about 1795-96 doing some surveying, and then they settled permanently the next year. So we've been around a long time here.
We're standing on the sidewalk in front of Olin Cook's wonderful home. I fairly drooled when we walked in the door. This is 213, and what's the name of the street?
East Main Street.
East Main Street.
Right.
You know, you don't have too many streets in these small
No,
communities,
no.
but you do have an East Main Street and maybe a West Main Street.
Yeah, and a church street. Always a church street.
Gotta have a church street. Before we're finished with our program today, we're going to find out a lot more about this community, about Olin, this wonderful church behind us, which we have in some neat old photographs.
That's right.
And we're going to have a lot of fun. Before we go inside to look at some of the pictures, I just want to get a little bit of your background. You were born and brought up here.
That's
and
right.
Worked here for
Yep.
years.
I was born in this house, and I was brought up here, went on to college, and worked downstate, taught downstate for a while down in Dolgeville, down near Utica. And then because of some family problems, a brother who was hurt in an accident, I came back up here and taught here for 30-some years, retired in 1991. Taught social studies, mostly juniors and seniors. Yeah.
And you attended the old schools here?
Oh yes, I attended the old school and then taught in the new one. The old school was abandoned in 1955. The new school was dedicated, so I got out in '46. So I was educated in the old school, but taught in the new one. So I know both the schools.
Isn't it nice to live long enough to go through all those transitions?
Yeah, right, right.
Oh, what a great community you have here, and what a great home. With your permission, Olin, we're going to step on the inside and look at some neat old pictures.
Okay, fine.
Let's
Glad to
do it
that.
as we continue to celebrate the 200th birthday in this great community of Chateaugay. Okay, we're inside this wonderful house, and first of all, I have to get the history of the house. I came in and I'm just going crazy looking at old clocks and the thickness of the walls, and I asked you how old this house was.
This house was built around 1818. It was built by a Colonel Thomas Smith. He was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. And the Smith family was one of the major families. They owned all of this side of Chateaugay, the whole of Main Street and way down to the Marble River. He ran a hotel, not a hotel, well, I guess you'd call it a hotel, saloon, whatever, downtown, and built this place as his home. I don't know what it looked like originally because it has been remodeled, but down cellar, there's still the remnants of the old bake ovens and the fireplace, because that was the original kitchen. You can still see remnants of the old cistern. And the barn out back is the original barn. So it's an old place, but we've tried to keep it up.
Isn't that wonderful? And you were born here, you left and came back here.
Yes.
And did you inherit the house? Or?
Yes, I inherited it from my mother, sure. Yeah.
Isn't that neat? And you've surrounded yourself with the most delightful old thing.
Well, most of them are family. We didn't buy very many things at all. Almost everything in here belonged to either my family or my wife's family. So
That makes it even better.
Yeah, they're heirlooms, we call them, not antiques.
Yeah, talk about feeling good when you come into a place, having all this stuff that's a part of your childhood
Yeah,
all
that's right.
around you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know, it's nice to meet somebody that thinks the same way you do. What would you do if you ever had to move? That's
Well,
what my wife
I
said, we
don't
could
know.
never move.
My problem is that there's so much stuff here, I don't know how I'd ever move it.
Well,
It'd take 2 or 3 trucks.
That's the same thing with me.
Yeah.
People our age, Olin, are very often talk to me, well, I'd like to get out of that big house and move into a little apartment or a condo somewhere. And I tell my wife, gee, I wish I could get a bigger house. So
Yeah, for more room.
more
Yeah.
room to put my stuff
Absolutely.
out.
Absolutely.
I hate it when all the old stuff gets in boxes and people
Yeah,
can't see it.
Yeah,
I can't
that's
see
true.
it.
Very true.
Well, you got a wonderful home here.
Well,
Just
thank you.
absolutely great. Now, we're going to start right here at this terrific old table.
Mm-hmm.
And let's look at some of the things here. And you tell me as I hold them up to Calvin, and try not to get too much glare on them, tell me what this is.
Okay, this is the first school built here in 1879, actually the Academy High School. It was up at the end of Church Street. The land for it was given by the Smith family.
Right? Okay, that's neat. Now, we got some postcards,
Yeah.
which are very tastefully displayed here.
Okay, and the top and the left is the hotel. It was originally just a log cabin and then was rebuilt, renamed. It was called the Chateau once, and then the Hotel Chateaugay. On the right at the top is the bank building. I don't know exactly when it was built, but there was a fire that burned all of West Main, and that was the only building that stood. And it's amazing, the pictures back then and the pictures today, the building looks almost the same.
Really, isn't that's what I like,
Yeah.
when the building is somehow
just-
preserved. Let me get my hand underneath here and my chin on the top. Okay.
Okay, the picture in the middle is from Chateauguay Lake, so I'll skip over that one. The two
We
here.
like Chateaugay Lake.
Well, but okay, this is a place called the Alley Out Hotel.
Very familiar to those
well,
of us who are still around the North
It,
Country.
it's not where the Alley Out is now.
No, but the
It
name
was-
survives.
Right, it was across the lake from that. And down here below are the Presbyterian Church, 2 views of it. The house next door was originally owned by a man who had a men's clothing store down on Main Street. And this one over here and this one here are 2 views of the Methodist Church up on Church Street. The Methodist Church built around the 1860s. This particular Presbyterian church was 1902, but the first Presbyterian church built here was built in the 1820s. In fact, I have an invitation asking someone to attend the raising of the meeting house in 1828, which was the forerunner of this.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and the minister in 1876 gave a centennial sermon telling the history of the church, and in it he said that this meeting house was raised by 100 men without any quarreling or intoxication.
Now I think that's a credo that we ought to adhere to today. We ought to try to get through every day without any quarreling or intoxication.
Right. All right.
I think I'd be pretty good at the quarreling part of it. As for the rest of it, I just don't know. All right, let me hold this one up and you tell me what we have here.
Okay, the top 2 views are views of Chateaugay Lake. The bottom 3 are views of the chasm. Our chasm is quite beautiful, almost as attractive, we think, as a Sable Chasm. The one on the left is the power station.
Probably have more water in your chasm than Os Able does.
Probably.
Boy, there, I tell you, it's just a trickle going down through
Oh, I
there
know.
somewhere.
3 times we've gone over there, and twice we've had to walk down instead of take the boats.
Isn't it amazing?
This middle one is the falls, and this would have been taken from the north looking south, and this is at the south end of the chasm looking north. At one time there was a hotel on the brow of the chasm, and they ran excursions down there, and it burned in the turn of the century and was never replaced. But it's really a beautiful place. The problem is you can't get there, really. It's all private property.
Ooh, okay. Now, Olin, can you tell me, how did Chateaugay get its name?
Well, there's 2 or 3 different stories, but the one that seems to be the most accurate is that the land along the St. Lawrence or along the Chateauguay River, rather, from where it goes into the St. Lawrence, was given to a man, a Frenchman, as a seigneury, and he named it after a place in France called Chateauguay. And then from that, the river got its name, and because we were downriver, we took the name Chateaugay ourselves. There are other stories about the naming of it, but that seems to be the most popular one.
That seems to be very reasonable. It's
yeah, there was another one about
thing.
Supposedly a man had by the name of Gay, had a big mansion down near Chateauguay, Quebec, and they used to call it the Chateauguay, but I think that's just a story.
Okay, well, we like to tell the stories too. All right, let's hold up the map here. It may be a little difficult to see, but we'll let Calvin get the best angle, and you tell us what we've got here.
Yeah, this is just a topographical map of the Chateauguay and Burke area, showing the village, and you got it sideways.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's try it this way.
Okay, that's okay.
This is this is the 4 corners, the Chateauguay River, the Marble River coming across, the Boardman River here. That was one of the reasons that Beeman and Roberts chose this place, because of the brook, the 2 rivers coming together, good for power, and there have been a lot of mills along the river. So that's topographical map.
Yeah, all the North Country communities, or many of the North Country communities, were settled along the rivers because of what you just mentioned there. That was the power.
Yep.
That was where we could bring the logs down. That's where we could put the grist mills and all the other mills.
Grist mills, sawmills. We had a tannery here too.
Oh, did you really?
Oh, yeah. Down in what they call Tannery Hollow on Route 11 going east, down in the little dip in the road. There was a tannery down there, a big one, but then went out of business. I don't remember the exact reasons, but it went out of business.
As you're talking to me, of course, Calvin and I love history, and we try to generate a passion among the people who live here so that they can tell people about it. But I wish we could take all these programs we've done from these great little communities on this side of the border and the other side of the border and market them nationwide so that people who live in the big cities could find out what tremendous history and charm there are in these communities in northern New York. It's
That's true.
just terrific. And if they were to see that and to show these in classrooms, these kids would go home and say, "Mom, guess where we want to go on vacation?"
That would be nice.
Not the Six Flags and not the Disney World, but the Chateaugay, New York.
That'd be good for our tourism, wouldn't it?
Well, there's so much to learn. And if you don't know history, then you don't know where you are, and you certainly don't know where you're going to
be.
Right. All right, let's pick this next map up, and I hope am I holding it correctly?
Yeah, this one says Chateaugay.
Okay.
Yeah, you got this
Okay.
one. Okay. This is the town of Chateaugay, and the districts are all labeled on here. And again, here are the 4 corners here in the center. And here's the Rutland Railroad running through. Again, you can see the Chateaugay River and the Marble River and the Boardman Brook coming through.
Well, Chateaugay, for those of you who've never been here, shame on you. But Chateaugay is not very far from where anybody who's viewing this program might be. It's just a short hop down from Plattsburgh down the old turnpike, which has quite a bit of history on its own.
True. Yeah, built after the War of 1812. It didn't go through Chateaugay. It went south of us, but it was a major route in the early 1800s.
Okay, now what have you got there?
This one here is kind of hard to see.
I'll hold one end and you hold the other.
This is an 1876 map, and it shows every house and who lived in it.
You got good eyes, you mean?
Yeah, if you have real sharp eyes and a magnifying glass, you can see. and then they have some others here. Constable, here's Malone down here.
Rush's Mills.
Rush's Mills.
Oh, yeah.
And then here they list a business directory telling different types of businesses, village offices, clergymen, residence directory. So this was about 1876, this map.
You know, when we did a program for the Bicentennial in Hemingford, Quebec, and some ambitious person took an old map like this from 1899, 100 years ago, and did a huge diorama as big as this room, and made every building out of styrofoam and then hand painted.
Oh, wow.
Not only was the village correct in every way, but there was a privy behind every Isn't that neat?
This is again from that same 1876, and this is the towns. Here's Chateaugay and Burke, Constable, Malone, Bangor. This is just the northern part of
Just to give people an idea how things are laid out up
how
here.
it was laid out. Again, you can see the four corners in Chateaugay and the.
Because the boundaries are still the same, right?
Oh yeah, they haven't changed. No.
Oh, you got some great stuff here. All right, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty.
Now, this is a little harder to see because.
Well, I can hold it up, and Calvin will lock the camera on it, and you describe it as he does that.
All right, this is the Johnson's Lumber Yard. It was one of the biggest lumber yards in the United States at one time. On the up on the top floor, you can see a horse. That was used to put harness on to advertise to sell harness. When I was about 5, 6 years old, the owner, whose name was Olin Johnson,
Was it really?
and I was named for him, he used to put me up on the horse, and I'd sit up
That
there,
horse
real
was
proud.
still there at that time?
Well, that horse was there until the 1950s, I think it was. No, it's later than that, 70s.
A little
when they sold it.
decrepit by that time.
Oh no, it was beautiful, beautiful
Really?
condition, you know. And they finally sold it when they auctioned off a lot of the material. They're refurbished this building, and it's now going to be an antique shop, and it's really attractive looking.
I'm sure you feel the same way I do, and far be it from me to ever block progress or deny that it has to occur. But in communities like this, isn't it great when they can take an old building like that and refurbish it and make it look like it did 100 years ago?
Right, instead of tearing it down.
Instead of ripping it down and putting in some modern building, which I suppose has to be done. But in this case, let's maintain the charm
and
of these small
really
communities as long as we can.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, good.
One more here.
All right, this is great.
Okay, this is on the Chateaugay River. The bridge here is called the High Bridge, and as you can see, it's covered. Later on, they took the cover off. In front of it is the Globe Flour Mill. There were 3 bridges on the river, all in the same area. This is called High Bridge. Down in here, you can't see it, but there was one called Low Bridge.
On the bottom.
And then farther this way is the current bridge, and then further down to the north was a ford. You can still see the road winding down to the river,
To the ford.
and then they just forded across.
And ultimately, they took the top off this great old covered bridge.
Yeah, and refurbished it. And a really interesting story about this. When they redid the bridge, my grandfather, Warren, was the cashier in the bank, and he took my mother in the buggy and brought her down, and they were the first ones across the bridge.
Come on.
Yeah.
There's a great family
Yeah,
story all by
yeah.
itself.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Oh, that's great. You have some wonderful things. Let's talk about how long it took to prepare for this bicentennial celebration, how many people were involved, and just what happened as it built up to a
let's see.
fever pitch.
I wasn't really closely involved in the planning, but the way it got started was kind of interesting. They started a thing here in town called the Revitalization Committee, and they wanted to stir up things in the community. So Kirby Selkirk, who was the chairman and who was, like everybody else under 50, a student of mine, was talking to me one day, and I said, Kirby, look up on the town hall there at the sign. And he looked up, and there it said, Chateaugay, oldest town in Franklin County, 1799. And I said, 2 years from now, is 1999. Don't you think you ought to have a bicentennial? Well, it took off from there. But I didn't get involved very much. A group got together, they formed a committee and began to organize. And I went to several meetings, but mostly it was younger people that did it, which is great. And then the only thing I was involved in was helping them a little bit with the history. And then I did a 1-day, 2-day display of historical memorabilia in a store downtown. But I won't take credit for very much of the actual organization.
You've made an amazing contribution just by being born here and teaching here and touching all those lives. You know, I always have to spend a moment when I'm talking to teachers and retired teachers to tip my hat to that profession, because it's a hard way to make a living, because it's very, very hard work when you do it well, but the personal rewards are immense.
I believe so, yeah. That's true.
You spent a lot of time with it. I'm sure your students, you say everybody under 50 around here went to school to you, but isn't it great when they come back and say, I remember?
Yeah, we have, for example, Jack Bilo. I don't know if you've heard about Jack.
Yep.
He wrote the history of the War of 1812 in Chateauguay, and now he's just written a book on the history of basketball. And he said that, you know, I was a little bit of a contribution to him getting interested in history.
Remember that name, because that would be another wonderful program for us sometime, just to interview you.
Yeah, he's quite interesting. He did this book on basketball. He went through every single year of basketball in the community with pictures of the teams, and it's about a 200 and some page booklet. Book.
It's an ambitious
effort. And the history of the War of 1812 is a full-length book too.
Isn't that great? Yeah. Well, see how you inspire people, and that makes you feel
well,
good.
I don't know that I inspire.
Have you reached this stage in your life? Just to make friends is a wonderful thing, and to have the people come back and chat, but to have people say, you know, you're the first one who really got me excited about so-and-so and so-and-so, and that does make you feel good. You're humble about it, but it gives you that little glow at this stage in our lives to have made a difference. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. That's great. All right, we love this house. We could stay here and spend the next 2 weeks here, but we're going to move along. What are we going to do next, Olin?
Well, we'll go down to the town hall and see the pictures that are on display down there, and some other memorabilia that's in the library. They have a historical display in the library. We'll take a look at that, and you can get a picture of the lumberyard as they look today compared to the picture we just showed.
That's great.
And pictures of town hall and some others.
And ultimately, in our program, Lord willing, and if the creek doesn't rise, and I don't think it will today, we're going to interview a wonderful lady who's 99 years old.
That's right, Mrs. Dupree. You know, and you'll enjoy her very much. She's pretty sharp.
She led the parade, and her great-granddaughter, Kelly Barnes, who works in the probation department with me, said, you know, my great-grandmother was right in the front of the parade. And I said, is she with the program?
No problem at all.
No problem.
Yeah, you'll enjoy talking to her very much.
I called them yesterday, and they told me to look for what was it, the greenhouse and the big barn that said Pleasant View.
Pleasant View Farm, yep.
Just 2 miles on the other side of Chateaugay.
Right.
We're going to stop there on the way. Olin, thanks again for inviting us here. I can't wait to see what we see next.
All right, we'll head downtown.
I walked in the front door and I said, Calvin, doesn't this smell like your old schoolhouse? It smells like my old high school, which looked almost like this building. Where are we now, Olin?
We're in the town hall, and these pictures were all done for the Bicentennial. And it was under a grant from the New York State, the Arts Council. Council on the Arts, yeah.
All right, now we'll start with a photograph that we've seen before.
We've seen this one before.
The beloved horse.
Yeah, the beloved horse at Johnson's Lumberyard. And the
building that Calvin stood on those steps, I believe.
That was the reviewing stand for the parade. The Bicentennial Parade.
We're delighted to look at it and see how fresh it looks today.
Yeah, they really are doing a nice job restoring it and repainting it. They expect to open in another couple weeks as an antique shop.
Saw some bustling going on inside. All right, moving around, The second picture,
This is another shot of the Presbyterian Church. As I said, this is the Presbyterian Church is the oldest congregation in the community. The first Presbyterian minister preached here in 1802. And
no kidding.
Yeah, and the first church was built in 1828 and not finished till 1842. It was just a shell. Then in 1902 well, it was partly damaged in the 1850s, and then in 1902 they tore it down and built this current building, the brick structure.
It looks like it could last for another 200 or 300 years by the looks of it.
Yeah,
it's strong. All right, this railroad station doesn't exist anymore.
No, this is the original railroad station, and it burned. And after the fire, in the ashes in the bottom, they found the safe with the hinges broken off. And there was $400 supposed to be in it, belonging to the railroad, and about $50 belonging to the agent, which wasn't found. So possibly somebody robbed it, then burned it. But they built a new building right in the same location, only not quite as elaborate as this one.
We had an ancient problem there.
Could be.
Yeah, okay.
Now this is the old town hall with the pillars, and this is the one that burned, and then they reconstructed. It was gutted. It wasn't completely destroyed, and so they used the exterior, but they weren't able to put the pillars back on, which is kind of too bad. It was pretty with the pillars on the front.
A lot of wooden construction in the 1800s and a lot of tragic fires, not only here, but in the city of Plattsburgh the same way, where the whole downtown district would be destroyed by one raging fire. We couldn't get to the scene as fast and didn't have pumpers that were strong enough.
No, we lost the west end of Chateaugay burned in the 1890s from the bank down about 8 or 10 buildings. So fires are, as you say, a problem in the early days. And the fire departments, of course, didn't. There was one fire, I'm trying to think what it was, but there was one fire that in 1925 that was so bad that they brought the pumper out from Malone. And not the next day, but very quickly after that, the local department bought their own pumper. They decided they needed a pumper after that fire.
That's an interesting story. All right, let's move down past the corridor here. And oh boy, you can almost hear the voices and the kids.
Yeah,
and
well, this is the bathing beach up at, where is it? Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
It says the Chateaugay Rotary Park.
Okay, the Rotary Park. Bill Dupree, that's a familiar name to everybody in Chateaugay. Coached here, taught agriculture for years and years. Died at the age of 99, just a couple of years ago. He was one of the prime movers in the recreation park here in Chateaugay. The Rotary Club was a sponsor, and they developed the park. This was a brook that came down. They built a dam and made this big pond for swimming. Unfortunately, the water was dirty because of the bottom being just sand and mud. And finally the state said we couldn't use it anymore. And so we built just small wading pools and a lap pool. So we don't have a nice big area like that anymore. But the park is used constantly by all sorts of things. There's softball diamond, there's a big pavilion, the swimming area, and picnic areas, and it's used extensively all summer long.
That's great. Looking at a picture like that puts me in mind of all the old swimming holes.
Yes, so we used to swim down on the Marble and up in the Boardman before they had these. Yes.
There's always a swimming hole. You always tied a rope with knots or a rope with a tire on it, and you took a flying leap and swung out over and let go.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
And we loved it. We loved it. As kids, we had different kind of freedom than kids have today. And I don't know if our parents wanted to teach us a kind of independence, but you know, when we were 7 or 8 years old, we'd go off to the swimming hole.
Sure. I can remember that we had a noon whistle and a 5 o'clock whistle at the milk station.
Oh, you
And when the noon whistle blew, you were supposed to come home for lunch, and when the 5 o'clock whistle blew, you came home for supper. But in between, you went wherever you wanted to.
Well,
of course,
we didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the ball game would start about 9 o'clock in the morning, go all day, and when you'd go home for lunch, come back, and the game would still be going. No organized little leagues back then.
No, and you know, there's a lot of theories about how much better that might have been in many ways, because you learned a lot of lessons when you were organizing your own team.
That's right.
You cheated and you cheated, and how do you figure that out?
Well,
and we learned the social interaction and a lot of things.
That's right. Very true.
We didn't have a noon whistle in my community, but my father was a huge man, and he had the capability of whistling real loud with his finger. And when he whistled, every kid went home for lunch.
that was a noon whistle for you.
You got it. All right, we've got the beautiful view.
Yeah, this is the chasm, the Chateaugay chasm, and I spoke of it before. And this is looking north through the chasm. It, as I said, had a power station there. I remember about the power station, they were Mr. McCoy, Ernest McCoy. His son told me once that his family were one of the very first to have lights. And Ernest was in high school then, and he'd be doing his homework, and the lights would dim. And that was to tell them that they were going to turn them off. They turned the power off at 11 o'clock at night and turned it back on in the morning. So when the lights went when the lights went dim, you either got out lamps or you went to bed, one or the other.
Most people were in bed by 11
I
o'clock
think
at
so.
night anyway back in those days, because they got up very early.
Right.
All right, moving right along. All right, what's next?
Okay, this
Should
is...
we turn a light on in here, Calvin? Would that be better? Is there a light on this end? I wonder if there is. Let's stop the machine just a minute and see if we can get a light on here. That's better. Greg showed us where the light switch was.
Yeah, right. Now we can see here. This is Main Street looking west from the Four Corners. Probably in the 1930s, maybe, looking at the cars there.
I see some mid-30s cars.
Mid-30s cars. And you can see the trees along Main Street that are all gone now. They cut, when they widened the street, they cut virtually every tree along both sides of Main Street. They planted some small ones to replace them, but it'll be a while before they're up.
Not the same, is it? Huh?
No.
All right. Oh, look at this. This is one of the most charming pictures I've ever seen.
Okay, I mentioned this when I said the house next to the Presbyterian Church belonged to a man who ran a clothing store. Well, this is the store. This is George Foster's store. He was a clothier, but he also was a bicycle rider. He rode bicycles. He and friends of his raced them. In fact, they raced bikes down to Huntington one time. He's a relative through marriage of mine.
Is he really?
Yeah.
That's a great picture. And this next one, I'm not sure.
The cattle drive down Main Street.
I've heard of the bulls and Hemingway and all that stuff. But
Well, what happened was there was an outbreak of bovine tuberculosis in the 1920s. I think about 1928. And all these cattle were condemned. And they're driving them down Main Street and then up to the depot. And they put them on freight car or cattle cars, took them out, and they were slaughtered. It was a way to try to control the disease.
Doesn't look like there was much macadam on that or asphalt.
No, there was though. This would have been the brick street. I think it's just a lot of water, but the street at that time was brick. They laid it in about 1910. The brick street.
Brick street.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. All right, where do we go? Across the way. Let me stand to your left, and Calvin, oh boy, look at this. This is kind of neat. Let's move this way a little bit. Chateaugay Athletic Association, the football team from 1900, 100 years ago.
Yeah, and they had football here for just a few years, and This fellow right here with the turtleneck, that's my father.
No kidding. Second from the left, bottom row.
Right.
Your dad.
Yeah, Edwin D. Cook, he was a pharmacist here. There's a list there of the names, but I don't know by, I couldn't name any of them, any of the others. I just recognize him. They do have the list
Look
there.
how fat the football was.
Yeah, well, that was before they threw forward passes, and they made the ball thinner after they started passing it. It was hard to
More like
throw
a
it.
rugby ball than.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, isn't that a great? Oh my, that's a wonder. That's a charming photograph. You wonder what they were all thinking. Like, let's go home to lunch or whatever. All right, here we are.
Okay, this is a chateau, the hotel on the corner. As I said, it's the oldest hotel or oldest hotel location. Originally, the first building was just a log hut, and then it was torn down, rebuilt. Name changed several times. Here you see in this one it says Chateau, and later on it says Hotel Chateaugay. Both these pictures, this one and the next one, are both of the same hotel.
Yeah, the
just
first one
different
was
times.
taken probably in the late 30s, and the other one
That's
around.
quite new. That's probably in the 40s.
Well, no, this one was probably looks like a Chevy. What would that be? A 57 Chevy, Calvi? 57 or
It's a fairly
before?
recent
But anyway,
Yep.
yeah, maybe 1957. So that's a little more. Yeah, okay. Calvin's got it pinned down. You can tell by the paint job, right, and the chrome on the Chevy.
Well, it's 56 Chevy.
Oh, okay. We got you. All right, now we'll move along. And what do we have here?
All right, up at the house, I showed you the picture of the original school.
Yes.
And this is the same school, but this is after an addition was put on. This is facing toward the north, and this is facing toward the west. And if you had a picture of the next school, you would see that this was part of the school, then they added on the other side a gym and changed the top for the final school up there before they tore it down and built the other one at night. In around 1954 or 55, the new school was dedicated.
What year did you graduate?
1946.
And how many in your graduating class? Can you remember?
Yeah, 33.
33, big
Yep.
class. Mine was 11 in Moira.
24 girls and 9 boys.
And do you keep in touch with?
Oh yes,
anyone?
we had a reunion in '96. We had our 50th, and there's still 4 or 5 of the class who live in the area. We keep in touch.
That's kind of nice, isn't it? Huh? All right. Next.
This one is the Union House, and this runs up Depot Street south, but originally it was on Main Street facing north, and then they moved it around the corner and built another block on the corner of Main. This one was finally torn down, and a creamery was built there. And then later, someone built, after the creamery, a house was built there. I think this is the one where there was a big tragedy on the 4th of July. They were going to fire a cannon, and apparently they didn't swab it out thoroughly, and when they had the ramrod in, the cannon went off, and the ramrod hit and killed a little girl and wounded 2 or 3 others.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah.
I don't know when that would have been.
I don't remember mid-1800s.
Yeah, that's a pretty ancient photograph, but it
Yeah.
does show that there was a telephone inside.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the old,
yeah.
the old telephone and the bicycle there. And as I,
Well, that wasn't torn down that long ago. I would say maybe in the 1930s, because I remember when it was there.
yeah, and how many communities had a Union House or a Union Hotel?
Yeah, right.
Almost every
Yeah,
one.
very popular name.
Now, this is a familiar picture. We looked at this photograph in the form of a small postcard,
Right,
but the bridge was different.
You notice that it was a covered bridge, and then they rebuilt it. And as I said, that's the Globe flour mill on the left. There were mills, as you know, all along the Chateauguay River using the water power there.
Oh, that's just terrific. All right, and the last photograph on this display is, look at those great old cars.
You can see it's Oliver and Spellman Garage. They ran a garage. They also Oliver and Spellman were also in the feed business. And this is up near the railroad station. This is where they would have been driving those cattle. In fact, the cattle you saw in that other picture belonged to Mr. Oliver, to a farm that he had, that another person was managing for him.
That's the greatest. And again, thanks to a grant from the Clinton County Council on the Arts and the Decentralization Grant Program, these displays were made possible. Had we been here during the actual celebration, we would have seen all kinds of things on the outside, which Calvin hopefully caught during the parade and will become a part of this program.
Right. Yeah.
The celebration, was it a one-day affair?
Oh, no, it was a week. It was a week, yeah. There was something different going on every day. We had, I could look it up in the book here.
You've got the whole thing.
I've got the book
there.
here. Sunday the 25th was the parade. Then Monday was the ice cream social and the barbershop quartet. They packed the theater here. That's another thing the Revitalization Committee is doing. They're refurbishing the theater here, the town theater. Hopefully they'll be able to raise some money to put heat in it, and they'd like to eventually get a movie projector and be able to have some movies in here.
I bet you those are that theater probably has a few memories.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, the old Friday night movies, 10 cents.
Never snuck in, did you?
No, of course not. And Tuesday we had the Rec Park and Professor Marvel's Old Time Magic Show. Wednesday there was a chili cook-off. You could go down to the American Legion and buy a bowl for $1 and sample all the chilies. Okay. Some of them were so hot that they blistered your lips. Had a fashion show and a beard contest. Thursday was Dairy Day and Maple Day. They had a dairy and maple bake-off with food that was supposed to be a combination of dairy and maple.
I missed it? Oh, man.
Friday and Saturday was the historical display that I had downtown, and tours of the town. You could take tours of the fish hatchery, the school, the cheese plant, and I think maybe they went down to the Fish and Game Club too. And then Friday was the big Rotary lobster feed. That was a big success. Everything was a success. Saturday morning they had a breakfast at the American Legion, archery shoot out at the Fish and Game, again the historical display, and then a big family picnic up at the Rec Park in the afternoon, and then fireworks at night. And then Sunday, August 1st, they had a softball tournament and a big roast beef dinner at the KFC. And then Sunday night they had an ecumenical service and closing ceremony. Again, filled the town hall.
That's great, and the weather held pretty good too.
We had great weather. We had just a little bit of rain, sprinkles of rain on Saturday night, and that was it. Every day was perfect. We ordered them, of course.
Of course we did. And what a great celebration it was, and we'll continue via this program. What are we going to look at next?
Well, let's see some more pictures over in the library, and there's some memorabilia there you might like to take a look at, too.
We're going to do it.
Okay.
The banner says the John G. Hotchkiss Memorial Collection of Historical Materials.
John Hotchkiss is an industrial arts teacher here in Chateaugay. He was mayor of the village for a number of years, very active in all sorts of community activities. And I believe, although I don't know for sure, but I think that money was given to the library in his memory because his wife, Jeanette Hotchkiss, is a librarian. And I expect that's where the money came from for this memorial.
We got some historical pictures again. We got the old Grand Army over there.
Grand Army of the Republic over on the left. The GAR was formed after the Civil War and kind of a forerunner for the American Legion, VFW, and so on. The local post here started out as the Roberts Post, the Benjamin Roberts. Then it became the Bailey. Theodorus Bailey Post, and that's a story. William Bailey came here around 1800, very early, and He built a place on Depot Street, which would be like back where we're standing. And he also was one of the founders of the Chateaugay Ore and Iron Company. They smelted a little iron up at the High Falls. And his son Theodorus was born here and was general, or admiral rather, in the Civil War, and was the hero of the Battle of New Orleans. And so they changed the name of the post to the Admiral Bailey Post. And his portrait, oil portrait, is down in the Legion Hall. Bailey moved to Plattsburgh, and that's why you have Bailey Avenue over in Plattsburgh. And here we have Bailey Brook. So the Bailey name is a name connected with the very early history of the community.
Fire companies were named hose companies back in those days, and that lower left photograph is also a charm.
Yeah, that's the Smith Hose Company. There were several hose companies. At first, you had to buy a membership and put a medallion on your house. And if you had a fire and you didn't have a medallion on your house, the fire company would watch it burn.
Oh, whoa! Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that was
buy into it.
Oh,
huh?
yeah, that was true all over the country. Very common. There were 2 or 3 hose companies, and this particular one, the Smith Company, my great-grandfather was an honorary member. He was a doctor here in Chateaugay.
Is that Dr. George Howe?
Dr. George Howe,
Well,
right.
while we're on the subject, let's take a look at this wonderful collection of this medical kit that he had. That is amazing. Did that survive in your family, or did
No,
somebody else have that?
there's a story connected with
Oh,
everything.
there's a story with everything, Olin.
I was in the library a month or so ago, and the librarian said that she had one of the historical the Revitalization Committee people had gotten a letter from a woman down in Florida who had some materials connected with Chateaugay and wanted to donate them. And she said, "Here's the letter." And I looked at the letter, and it happened to be my cousin, whom I had not heard of since I was about 16 years old. She was a relative also of George Howe. George Howe had 2 daughters, my grandmother and her grandmother. And so when he died, apparently some of the things went to her mother, or her grandmother rather, and some went to my grandmother. And so this particular one, this medical kit, had gone down there. And since she had no children, she wanted this to be in Chateaugay, so she sent it up here. I have his saddlebags, I have his diploma from medical school, number of other things. I have his day books, which are really interesting because he would write notes in them. He wrote a note on July 4th, 1876, that he celebrated the centennial by going to a dinner in the Grove and then going to Malone at night for fireworks.
Isn't that amazing? And he was 2 years old when the Battle of Plattsburgh was fought.
Yeah, he lived
to the ripe old age of 91 by the looks of it. Born in 1812.
Right, died in 1903.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. And there are some other things here that came. Here's some more pictures. These are postcards. This is one that you see quite a bit. Now, very early. Here's your watering trough here.
Those are mules.
And these are mules. And again, the street is all dirt. You can see the boardwalk across the street from one side to the other. The bank building was there.
When people say boardwalk, we're talking about wooden sidewalks here, folks. That were prevalent back in those days to get you up a little bit out of the mud, you know?
And then here's Main Street looking west. This is the same picture, one black and white and one colored.
Oh, what a great collection. Are these from private collections?
Yeah,
or?
these were all sent up by my cousin from Florida. Because they lived down in Florida, people from Chateaugay would write postcards to them and would use scenes of Chateaugay to remind them of.
Of course.
And since her grandfather had the store on the corner here, And so they would often send a picture. See, they've drawn an arrow to point to the store, Foster's store.
Yeah.
Here's another shot of the chateau, the hotel, two of them here. Here's the school again when it was expanded the first time. Again, the Presbyterian church, and this is the house next door, which was George Foster's home.
Great pictures.
These are more recent, as you can see. These are quite recent pictures of Chateaugay, probably some as late as the 1950s.
Yeah, late 40s, 50s.
There's Oliver's. It was Oliver and Spellman, then Spellman died, and it became just Oliver's. That's a picture of Malone.
Oh
We
boy,
don't
that's
talk
a
about
great.
that.
I've seen that picture before. Well, let's. What was that, Calvin? Olin, as we were just changing the battery in our camera, you were telling me a great story about your great-grandfather, Dr. George Howe, and describing what?
Knee surgery.
Wow.
He gave a lecture to the society, the medical society. He was president of the society, but I don't know the date. And he described doing actual knee surgery, opening up and doing what we would now call that ACLU, and the problems that were connected with doing it. I didn't read the whole thing, so I don't know whether it was successful
It was
or not.
slippery getting in.
He said it was slippery. Sometimes they had to stop right there because they couldn't get the instrument to slide into the opening properly.
Isn't that amazing? All right, street scenes. This is a unique photograph.
This is a panorama view of Chateaugay. In the center of the picture, you're looking straight down toward the Canadian border on 374. On the left is the bank, and on the right, the block of stores. The big block on the corner is the Masonic block. And then coming around, you're looking east on Main Street, around to the corner, the drugstore on the corner here. Going all the way back to the other side, you're looking at the Hotel Chateaugay or the Chateau.
Was that Cook's drugstore?
Well, I'm not sure. It depends on the time frame. My father did have a drugstore on the corner there, but a man named McKenna had it before, and a man named Jackson before that. So it might be, it might not be. I'd have to look more closely. You might be able
See
to
if
find
he's in
the
there.
name. Well, yeah, or see if you could find the name.
right.
No, it's McKenna.
Okay,
I
yeah,
can
I
see
see
McKenna
it.
there.
Okay.
This picture was in the Chateaugay record office, and when the record was bought by the Telegram, they took it to Malone, and with a lot of other things which we wanted very badly, but they seemed to think they should have them. And finally, they decided to give us a few things. This picture, the frame was broken, the glass broken, it was in pretty bad shape. We brought it over here, and the village board provided the money to have it reframed and put it in here.
It's pretty decent. Down below, a much smaller chateau.
Yeah, that's the chateau before it was expanded. Again, probably in the mid-1800s. But you can see it had the 2 stories, and what they did was add it on and curved it around the corner and went further up Depot Street.
So you got a lot of materials gathered for this bicentennial. You got books from the old Chateaugay waterworks.
This project was started not really in connection with the bicentennial. Again, they got a grant for this to try to preserve our historical records here in the community. And there's a committee working on it. Phyllis Thompson and Emma, I always think of people with their names before they were married.
Yeah.
Emma Perry are on the committee with Mrs. Hotchkiss. And they've been collecting the materials and putting them in the right kind of containers so that they won't
That's
rot,
wonderful.
spoil.
Over on the left-hand side, a program from the Chateaugay Opera House, and I see an advertisement on the right-hand page, get it at Cook's.
Yep, that's my father's drugstore. Yeah, that was his slogan.
Is that the same building that they're trying to restore now?
The Opera House?
Yeah, that's not the theater, right?
My understanding was that the Opera House was on the second floor of the building across the street, which is Pearl's department store, or was. But I'm not sure. It might have been the town hall, and they might have called it the Opera House. That I'm not sure of.
Okay. But if people come down here to Chateaugay and want to look around, I'm sure they can get to view some of these things.
Oh, yes. You know, of course, the town hall is open, the library is open on Mondays and Wednesdays and Saturdays, and you can come in and view these things. Hopefully we'll have more in the days to come as we collect more and as we get more organized. I still have quite a bit of my great-grandfather's material at home, and that'll probably come down here later.
Now, in this little booklet called The Oldest Town in Franklin County, Chateaugay, New York, established 1799, there is a brief history of a lot of the things that happened here from the very beginning. Olin and I are going to sit down somewhere and go through a little bit of that just briefly so we can get a general view. We've touched on a few prominent eras in history. Right. We're going to give you the whole package in just a few moments as we continue our program. All right, and then we're going to get into some serious history, right, Mr. Cook, right, from the actual booklet, which our viewers could probably get a copy of if they knew where to go.
Well, there's still some available. The only place I know for sure right now is Kirby Selkirk has a stand, a vegetable stand on Main Street, and he has some. I saw them on the counter in his store, but there are probably other places in town that you might find one if you're going through.
I mentioned that
they sold the first 1,000 right out.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, and then did a reprint.
Second printing.
Yeah, it was second printing. Yeah.
Kirby is the president of the Chateaugay Revitalization Committee, right? I see his name here, and Mary Rankin and Connie Davis and Helen Ryan. They're the hard-working group, huh?
Right? Yeah, very so. And I want to give credit to the author of this book because she did a great job, Lynn LeBaire, Lynn Ryan LeBaire, and a student of mine, of course.
Of course, aren't they all?
Aren't they all?
How much would this book cost you?
It's $1.
Wow, that's really tough. That would break the bank, huh?
That's why I'm buying you one.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Calvin breaks loose for the buck.
Yeah.
All right, now there is this book. For the benefit of our viewers, we'll give them pictures and a little bit of history of Chateaugay. Just briefly go through each section for me, will you?
Okay, the early settlers, as I think I've said before, Nathan Beeman from Plattsburgh and Benjamin Roberts from Vermont came here in 1795 to survey this territory. They both liked it so well that the next year, 1796, Benjamin Roberts came back here with another man, built a little lean-to down on the Marble. And then that spring, they came over and made maple syrup. So the first industry in Chateaugay was maple syrup.
I should have known.
Then that summer, they came in with some of the family. And Nathan Beeman, of course, that name may be familiar to some of you. He's the man who led Ethan Allen's troops into Fort Ticonderoga in 1775. And he lived in Chateaugay until he died in 1850. And 1799 was the founding of the town, as we said before. That's why we're having our bicentennial. In the War of 1812, Chateaugay...
What was the town before that? We need to mention the previous town there.
Oh, I don't know.
Champlain.
Oh, yeah. Was it taken away from Champlain?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
I probably skipped right over that.
Calvin,
yes, you're right. It says, in 1799, the population had grown considerably, and the distance to the seat of town government in Champlain was far enough to warrant the creation of a separate town.
Calvin had it because he lives on the Ridge
that's
Road.
Why he jumped in.
He didn't
right?
want the rest of the Castines to rise up.
Right.
Okay.
So in the War of 1812, Chateaugay was an important point on the frontier. There were two blockhouses in town, one down in the Marble River, and another one down in Earlville, which is northeast of the town. The battle at Fort Covington was probably the biggest battle in the area, and after that battle, the troops retreated back from Fort Covington to Chateaugay and stayed here, and that was in 1914, and it was a severe 1814 severe dysentery, fever, and so on, and quite a few soldiers died. Were buried in a common grave here, and when they were digging the foundation for a house on Depot Street, they dug up some of the bones.
Oh, wow.
So that's the story of the War of 1812. The religions, I've kind of covered that a little bit as far as the Presbyterian Church is concerned, but the Methodist Church also began around 1802, about the same time as the Presbyterian. 1835 was when there was the first active minister here. He was traveling in and out, and the first church was built in 1854. Damaged like the Presbyterian Church in the tornado in 1856, repaired, and then the present church was built in 1880. There's several small Baptist churches in town, but none of them persevered, and in the society went out of business in 1899, and the church was torn down and a house was built there. Episcopal churches, they tried 3 different times to establish an Episcopal church in Chateaugay, but again, none of those succeeded. The Catholics had their first church here in 1844. It was destroyed by the tornado in 1856 completely. And they rebuilt under the direction of Father Dupree in 1863. And
I love this line. Excuse me for interrupting. By fighting whiskey selling and drinking in the confessional and at the polls, Father Dupree won the esteem of the entire community.
yeah,
Isn't that precious? I love it.
yeah, and then they, 1916, lightning hit the belfry of the church. The fire destroyed the building again, and they built another new one in 1925 was the first time it was open. We had a railroad through Chateaugay. It was completed in 1850, and probably the highlight of the railroad in this area was the tunnel, which was constructed at the bottom of a ravine on the Chateauguay River. The tunnel is 300 feet long, 25 feet wide, went through solid rock, and it required 500,000 cubic yards of earth to fill above it to bring it up to grade. Took 5 months to complete and $130,000. In 1850, that was a lot of money. That railroad was really active. One of the first refrigerator cars was used on this road. They took a regular boxcar, built another wall inside, filled it with sawdust, and used it to transport butter. It says in the book here that July 1st, 1851, they carried 8 tons of butter from the local farmers to Boston. And even after paying the freight charges, they made $800 more than they would have if they'd sold it locally. Butter was a big industry here. A lot of butter factories in Chateaugay, and interestingly enough, most of it went to Boston. And the milk too, from here.
Tunnel still there?
Pardon me?
Is the tunnel still exists?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah, it's still there. Yeah, and in fact, you can go across that rail bed is a snowmobile trail now and a ski trail.
Yeah, so some of our people who are watching this program might want to investigate.
You can go up in the tunnel. Good fishing along there on the Chateauguay River.
Great.
And a little bit more on the railroad. The freight charges, well, no, I guess not. They just kind of skip here over to the hotels because the hotels where, people would stay in the hotels and take the railroad in and out. The Franklin House, built by Colonel Thomas Smith, I mentioned him because that's my home, was his house. And that burned in 1857. The Union House, that was the one that we saw the picture of that runs up along Depot Street. And then the Roberts House, which was became the Chateau. The railroad was obviously important because it was the main way of bringing produce out of Chateaugay and bringing material in. Excuse me. I've seen pictures of sleighs parked up at the railway station, piled with potatoes being shipped out.
No kidding.
And my father used to get his ice cream all the way from Burlington, Vermont by rail. Would come in cartons in dry ice. We'd go up to the railroad station, pick it up. And the mail would come into the station and would be wheeled down in a two-wheel cart down to the post office on Depot Street. So it was a pretty active place. The railroads closed in the 1950s.
You mentioned that several of the industries that existed over the last couple hundred years, and there were some amazing things here. These communities were really, really hopping back in the last century.
Well, the book here says that over the 200 years, we've had 3 power companies, a dozen creameries, several grist mills, numerous sawmills, 6 starch factories, a planing mill, 2 tanneries, a foundry, 2 pulp mills, a milk plant, 2 cheese plants, a wood chip plant, and a couple of dairies.
Is it? And countless other grocery stores.
Grocery stores, meat markets, barber shops, bars, restaurants, blacksmith shops, liveries, and drugstores. All have been instrumental in making Chateaugay a memorable place to live.
Oh, boy. Yeah, so many things, so many pieces of history. The powerhouse is in here in the Chateaugay Chasm, the old generators, the co-op plants. If it hadn't been for the river, of course, none of that would have happened. The place wouldn't exist, probably.
No, the river really was very important, as you say, with the mills and the power station and recreation, too, because we now have the High Falls Park on south of town.
And this building we're sitting in right now, it looks like was completed in 1910. That says the original
Town Hall, 1910, and then the fire was 1940, and was rebuilt, and the bowling alleys in 1941, and then it was now in 1968 it was purchased by another group, and still active. And of course, the town hall has the library, and we're sitting in the village boardroom, also the town board here, the town clerk's office. Upstairs, what used to be a ballroom is used by a preschool called the Chateaugay Little School. So the town hall is active. The theater, which has been closed for a long time, has been taken over by the Chateaugay Revitalization Committee. This summer we've had a series of programs sponsored by the Chateaugay Lakes Association. We've had some really fine programs here, well-known groups. The last group that we had here was the Woods Tea Company from Burlington. You're probably
amazing.
Yes.
They are wonderful.
Put on a 2-hour show to a packed house. Next week we have a group coming from the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, Maryland. There's a cello player, I think, a pianist, 2 vocalists. And we've had very nice programs in the summer. Worth coming to see if you're in the area. Check to find out the schedule, and we're happy to have as many as want to come.
Yeah, free parking. I look at the next page on page 20, and there is a great picture of the Chateaugay Fairgrounds.
Well, Chateaugay decided to compete with Malone and founded a Chateaugay Agricultural Society for Chateaugay, Belmont, Clinton, and Ellenburg. It was started in 1906 with $10,000, and they began to build quite an extensive thing. They had a grandstand, exhibition halls, racetrack. First fair was 1908. In 1911, they decided to put on a big race. It was known as the $20,000 trot. They were going to offer a $20,000 purse for this trot. A man by the name of James Farley, who was known better for his actions with the Pinkertons as a strikebreaker, had several horses, and one of which he was positive would win, and he was supposed to guarantee the purse for the race. Well, because of the amount of money involved, it attracted a lot of horses. Well, to make a long story short, his horse didn't win. In fact, he had three horses. They came in 3rd, 9th, and 11th. and he welched on his deal. He wouldn't pay. And so the society was sued, and Farley sued them, and they sued him, and eventually, well, very shortly after, the fair went bankrupt and went out of business.
What a tragedy, huh?
For a long time, the grandstand became the grandstands for a baseball diamond, and we had a town team, the Chateaugay Ponies, and the high school played there. But it went into disrepair, and then when the cheese plant expanded, they bought it out. There's one building left. The vegetable hall is still left and is for sale, but it's in pretty sad condition. It's kind of interesting that also they used to race on Main Street here.
Well, you know, our younger viewers will not be aware that they had horse races on main streets in a lot of small communities. My father-in-law, the late Alfred Vaughn, would tell me as a boy about the exciting horse races right down through the main street in Morrisonville, New York. And guess what? They did it in Chateaugay too, didn't they?
Oh, yes. Well, they used to race right down Main Street from the Presbyterian Church to the Catholic Church. I don't know why it was from church to church, but and usually what would happen is the boys would be in the bar and they'd be arguing over their horses, and then somebody would say, my horse can beat yours, and out they'd go and have a race. The one they mentioned in the book here was the two horses raced for a purse of $50. The Hummingbird and the Alcontine, and two out of three heats. And according to this, the Alcontine won by 2 lengths. Second heat was a repeat of the first, and Alcontine won the purse. It's interesting that they just shut down the traffic on Main Street. Everybody closed their businesses. Everybody went out and watched the race. Yeah, I don't think. Well, we did close Main Street here for kind of an interesting thing during the Bicentennial. We closed the four corners, and everybody in town was invited to come down and stand in the four corners, and they took a picture of us. The Telegram, they rented or borrowed the big aerial ladder truck from Malone, and the photographer got up on top of that and took a picture of the crowd. Oh, a couple hundred, I guess, were there.
I think, you know, in Hemingford, they had 500 people.
Well, we didn't
Some
do as
people
well.
just didn't want their pictures taken. You could see people lurking in the background.
It was not a nice day here. It was windy, cold, and partial rain. And
We're talking history, folks.
well, we got some people here anyhow.
What would a discussion of any North Country town be without the discussion of Prohibition?
Prohibition. Oh yes. Yeah. Well, the Prohibition, of course, was pretty active here because we're only 4 miles from the border, and there was always a lot of traffic through here. The thing I remember best, because not of Prohibition, but afterward, when I was a little boy and used to play around up on the Boardman Hill, that the whole side of that hill down to the brook was completely covered with broken glass, where they would dump the loads of beer and liquor and smash them. The stories are they didn't all get smashed, though.
I don't imagine. You know, 1 out of 3 took a ride to somebody's house.
Yeah.
All right.
And up on the road to Brainardsville on 374, there's a place called the Halfway House, and a friend of mine's family owned it when I was in high school. I remember going up there, and there were a set of steps that went from behind the bar to a doorway which went upstairs. And each of the steps was hinged and compartmentalized, where they could put the bottles and hide them from the revenuers.
That's interesting. And the schools, we mentioned.
Yeah, we talked about the schools. The Free Academy opened in 1879. We saw the picture of that. And then they talk about during World War II, building the model planes. They were called spotters planes. They were made out of hardwood, and they were modeled after all the different aircraft. And then for a while, it tells that the top floor was used for spotters because they had an aircraft spotter program. But then they built
I was in that.
I was too. They built a little shack afterwards out in on the school grounds, with a little pot-belly stove in it. I can remember up there. watching for airplanes.
We had our little books to see.
Oh
what they
yeah,
looked like.
one by high.
I could
You had to read-
never find one of those Japanese planes,
No,
thank goodness.
No, nothing ever flew over that was very exciting. And 1952 is when the new school was built, and it was completed in 1954. And the school has always been, you know, a center for the community, like schools are in most communities. And recently, the students have been doing quite a nice job with musicals. They've done Oklahoma, and then this year they did this past year they did Hello Dolly. And, quite entertaining.
Yep.
The fire departments here in town, 1860, the Phoenix Hook and Ladder was the first one, and then the Franklin Hook and Ladder in 1878, and then as we saw, there was the Smith Hose Company, and they had a fire department building up on Church Street, in the corner of Church and Franklin, which had been the school before they built a new building. And then they moved down to Main Street, which is right next door here, the fire department, which is now a grocery store, and then built a new department up on Depot Street. And it tells that the first request for mutual aid was 1893. It was 18 degrees below zero. Fire broke out on the north side of Main Street. That sounds about right, between John and River. Call was sent to Malone, and a special train was set up to bring apparatus to Chateaugay. It didn't work. Everything was burned on that side of Main Street. Then in 1925, the Excelsior Mill, which is over on Monroe Street, burned, and they sent to Malone, and they got an American LaFrance pumper, and they hooked that up to a hydrant on Depot Street and had the fire that would water that would cover the building. And they lost the mill, but it's made them decide that they would buy a pumper of their own. So they bought a pumper in 1925. A number of different companies. The Chateaugay Fire Department, of course, is active now as a volunteer department. They have a field day every year, like most fire departments. They're also, of course, are equally important, or maybe more important, as a rescue company. We have many more rescues than fires, thankfully. I mean, thankfully that we don't have a lot of fires. Newspapers in town, Chateaugay's had several. The Chateaugay Record and Franklin County Democrat went on from about 1877 until 1995, when it was closed up. It was purchased by the Telegram and run by them for a while, and then they closed it. And they did, however, run a memorial edition of it for the Bicentennial.
And the Chateaugay weather. I mean, you know, where would we be without a Chateaugay thaw, right?
Well, yeah, also one of my favorite stories is the local man who was talking to a stranger in town, and the stranger said, "What do you do in the summer here?" He says, "On that day we have a ball game."
I love it.
He also said that the climate here was 9 months of winter and 3 months of poor sledding. So,
Oh, God.
so the Chateaugay thaw is
Chateaugay thaw, 37 below and a foot of snow.
Yeah, but
I've heard variations of that.
But we have to confess that the Chateaugay thaw was actually originally the Boonville thaw, written by a minister just after the Civil War. And apparently somebody picked it up and changed the words to make it the Chateaugay thaw. But we still like to think of it as our
And the
poem.
last lines, 2 men lie beneath, and they came by their death, frozen stiff in a Chateaugay thaw. I love it.
40 below and a hell of a
Oh,
blow.
yeah, you got that.
Now,
Great stuff, great stuff.
we are very fortunate with our health care. We've had a number of doctors in town. We lost 2 doctors in the flu epidemic in 1918. Both Dr. Tobin and Dr. McGibbon both died of the flu in that terrible epidemic that hit the whole of the United States. You can go up into the cemeteries here and see maybe 4 or 5 of the same family all died in 1918 or 1919. very bad. We have now, of course, a very nice health clinic. It started over in Church Street, but now it was dedicated in 1998. It's the Bassett Health Center, named for Mrs. Bassett, whose sons were large contributors to the health center. The rec park, we mentioned that. We saw a picture. It was they started. The Rotary Club was started in 1927. The rec park in 1960. Pool completed in 1961, and the park became town property in 1968. And after the problem with the water clarity, they built the concrete pools, and it's still a very popular place, of course. And we saw the picture of the bridge, what they call the High Bridge, and there were 3 of them. The first was called the Military Bridge, built in the very early 1800s, and then the second, the steel deck bridge, in 1929, and the third was built in 1988. Now those both are. There is another bridge that she doesn't mention, the one that we saw, which is called the High Bridge. She doesn't mention it here. There are really 4, but I never counted the new bridge, as they say, as 2, because it was really the same bridge. They just made some slight changes in it. And it's interesting that there is only 1 fatality on that bridge when a young man was being chased by the Malone police, and he came from the Malone direction and went off the right-hand side and down into the river. And of course, our famous horse. I remember while we were off camera, we were talking about Ray Holmes, and when he'd retired, some of the basketball players from Chateaugay went over, and one of them made a short speech, and he said that before Ray went to Plattsburgh, that he coached in a 1-horse town, but that 1 horse won the Derby.
I love it. Isn't that great?
Yeah, the horse named Chateaugay. His owner was an investor in the Republic Steel Corporation in Lion Mountain, which was originally called Chateaugay Ore and Iron Company, and so he got the name Chateaugay from that, and named the horse Chateaugay, won the Derby, and also won the Preakness, but lost the Belmont, came in second, so he was almost a Triple Crown winner. Yeah.
Really great history, and there's a whole section on other charitable organizations and Eastern Star and all the others.
The Catholic Daughters, Eastern Star, of course the Masonic Lodge. Masonic Lodge, there was a story there, and during the War of 1812, the British occupied Chateaugay, and they broke into the Masonic Lodge and stole what they call the jewels, the emblems of the offices, and took them down to Canada. And after the war, this man by the name of Gates Hoyt went down there and talked to the British, and they were very apologetic, and they gave the lodge a new set of jewels, which are now down in New York City in the museum, the Masonic Museum.
So this history, I might to give credit where credit is due, was written by Lynn LeBaire.
Lynn Ryan LeBaire, yes. And she gives credit to a number of people that helped her: John and Grace Ryan, Rose Douglas, Bev Titus, myself, Bill Twaddle, Tom Camel, Jack Boyer, Jeanette Hotchkiss, Mary Milan, Betty Crawford, Sue McDonald, June Cook, Richard Johnson, Francis Whalen, Jack McCormick, Jim Humiston, all people who helped her with her research, and also Tom Collins, who did the cancellation for the mail. We had a first day cover cancellation, and Tom Collins, our art teacher, did the drawing for it, and the cover. The design on the cover was done by William Boyer, and that we used on the cover. And then we've used this as our Bicentennial logo.
You're pretty proud of this town you live in,
Of course.
and it's obvious that the Bicentennial was worth all the effort it took to get it together, and I would have to say, in retrospect, it was a raging success.
It was. We were very successful. We had no idea, you know, how successful we were going to be. But you could tell even before it started because our fundraisers all went over budget. We had budgeted how much we thought we would take in from each one. We took in more. The quilt, we had a group of ladies in the community who did a bicentennial quilt. They took scenes from all around the village and made them into quilt squares and made a quilt, and they sold about twice as many tickets to that as they expected.
Really? Oh, they raffled it off?
Oh, yes, it was raffled off.
What a charm that would be to own.
Angie Toohill won it, and she's local. We're happy for that because our bicentennial, our national bicentennial quilt is in town too. We made one for that and raffled it, and that one stayed in town. So we have two bicentennial quilts, both in town.
Let's hope that both of those quilts stay around for another couple hundred years, so somebody can enjoy them. Yeah,
can display them at the next one. I told several people that I would be happy to chair the tricentennial committee.
You know, Calvin and I have already made a commitment, and I hope I'm not stretching it, but as you talked about the connection with people here in the Battle of Plattsburgh and so on, and we're working on almost at a fever pitch now, getting ready for 2014, the bicentennial of the Battle of Plattsburgh on September 11th, 1814, and we're hoping to be around, and if I have to push Calvin in his wheelchair, as I've said before, we're going to be around.
Right.
History is important to me. I know it. Obviously, it is to you. It's a passion with you.
Oh yes, I enjoy it very much, very much. Yeah.
It's fun to learn, and if we can instill this thirst for knowledge about where we came from in our kids today, I think we've accomplished something.
I think it's the local that will attract people. You know, when it's people you know or things that you're acquainted with, that gets you started, and then from there you can move out. We had a series of letters that one of my students brought in that his family had from a soldier in the Civil War. And so he got interested, and what he did is he took the letters and traced the soldier's trip through the war, all the different battles, places he had been, did a map, did research on the Civil War just by following that one soldier. And the eerie thing about it was that all the letters that this man wrote, he would sign with love or thinking of you. The last letter in the set, he signed goodbye. And 4 days later, he was wounded, and a week later, he died.
Wow. Talk about a powerful story.
Yeah, and you say, man, you know, he was killed at the very famous battle, the Battle of the Crater at Petersburg.
Yeah. And he somehow had a sense about his own mortality.
Foreboding. Well, it was a big battle, and I suppose he figured I've cheated it long enough. And it was
we look at the Civil War, and kids study it today, and I look back at it as one of the most gruesome wars in history.
Yeah, you look at go down to Gettysburg and stand there and look across that field and think how they Pickett's charge across that open field. They were just.
You can just hear. I can
mow them down.
When I'm there, I can hear the guns fire and hear the screams of agony, and know that there wasn't any way to treat some of these people who just lay there for a long time.
And my grandfather was in the Civil War, lost a leg at Cold Harbor, survived. I have his pension papers and his widow's pension to my grandmother when he died, and so I have a connection to that war too.
You've got a connection to everything within 400 miles of here. And the best part of it is you know what all those connections are.
Sure. Well, his family have been here for a long time. So we have two people here in the community who are direct descendants of Benjamin Roberts. William Tacey, Bill Tacey. In fact, he rode in the parade. He's a direct descendant. And the Rust family in town here They're direct descendants from Benjamin Russ, both on the female side. But so we have people still in town who can trace back to the very first settlers.
Who's the oldest citizen living?
Mrs. Dupree. And you're going to go see her, right?
See how the segues work in these programs?
Yeah, you'll move right on from here and head out and talk to her, and you're going to enjoy it.
We're going to be at the Pleasant View Farm, and we're going to have such fun to wrap up this program. Hopefully, I don't know if we'll have any time for Calvin to show any of the parade in this program, but if we have to do a chapter 2, we've been known to do that before. Olin, thank you so much for taking this time and joining us today. You've given me an education. I don't know if I could pass or fail based on what I remembered, but it's been a great experience for me.
Well, I've enjoyed it too, and thank you for asking me. It's been a pleasure for me too. And I won't make the quiz any more than multiple choice, or maybe true false.
I just might knock on your door anytime on the way through just to hear those sleigh bells ring on
Yeah, well,
your
stop by anytime. I'll show you the bake ovens downstairs.
I'd love to do that. It's a charming community. If you want to sense it, come on in and visit the folks anytime right here in Chateaugay, the oldest town in Franklin County. I'm just going to talk to you. Well, I promised you when I finished talking with Olin that we would move up the road a couple of miles and we would come in and join a wonderful lady who lives at a place called Pleasant View Farms. Come on in. We're just doing a television interview and we'll stop for just a minute.
Okay, thanks.
Well, we just interrupted for a moment because Margaret's lunch arrived and they brought her lunch, and we won't interrupt her for very long. We'll let her get back to her lunch. But as we started to say, I called your daughter-in-law, Edna, yesterday and told her we were coming down. She forgot to tell you we were going to be here today.
Why, I'm quite sure she forgot.
But your son Bob lives right next door to you, right?
Yeah, and I don't have to go out. There's a door there.
Right there's a door that goes in between.
Yes, yeah.
Now we cannot believe that you are 99 years young.
Last May 9th.
And so you are probably the oldest
I am. That's
citizen
why
in this area.
Yes. That's why they had me on the parade, I guess.
And I asked you if you liked the parade, and you said I didn't see very much of it.
I didn't. The picture. Norma took a picture, and there were a lot of people.
You were right in the front, though, weren't you?
But I was right in the front seat. Bob and Norma was in the back, and so they tell me it was a nice parade.
Well, it had to be fun. It had to be fun for you.
Well, when we stopped, and yes, I enjoyed it anyway.
I missed it, but Calvin got some pictures of it, and I didn't know that you were in the parade until your great-granddaughter, Kelly Barnes, who works with me in the Clinton County Probation Department, said, "Oh, you got to go and talk to my great-grandma."
Yes, it is her great-grandma. Yes, I like her. She's a nice girl.
Boy, and what a basketball player she is, too.
Yeah, that's right, too. That's right. She's a good basketball player.
And she went, back in June, she traveled all the way up to Anchorage, Alaska, and she ran in a marathon up there to help people who suffer a terrible cancer disease. And she ran that marathon to help people with leukemia. And she had a great time. They even saw a moose up there.
I remember her saying that. That's right. I remember her saying that.
Margaret, tell me a little bit about what it was like. Did you grow up around here? Were you born and brought up here?
No, I was born and brought up in Churubusco, New York.
Well, that's not so far away.
No.
Just a hoop and a holler.
Churubusco, on a farm. Yeah, on a farm in Churubusco. Yeah.
What was your maiden name?
Silver.
Silver.
Margaret Silver. Yeah.
And who were your dad and mom?
Ference. P-H-E-R-E-N-C-E. The P-H is silent. Ference Silver, and my mother was X-E-N-I-A. Zena Silver.
Aren't those great names?
She was Zena Rufrange. R-U-F-I-E-N-G-E. Really French, eh?
But I would say that's a French name. Did they must have come over from Canada, maybe?
Yes. Right, they did. Yeah.
So did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one brother Lloyd, and a sister Loretta and Agnes that passed away. Yeah.
So you're born and brought up there in Cherubusco.
Yes, on the farm.
And then what? When did you move over here?
Oh my goodness, no. When did we were married in December? I don't know.
It wasn't last week anyway, right? It was a long time ago.
A long time ago, right? It's a long time ago.
So you've lived over here for quite a while.
Yes, yes. We had a house in Chateaugay, and we had a fire. The house burnt, and my husband bought this. He came and see this place, and we liked it, so he bought this place. And that is in, I can't remember. I must have it wrote down though, but I can't remember. So he bought this place, and I like it here.
Just feels like home now, doesn't it? Huh?
Yes, and then Bob took over, of course, and they fixed me in my apartment here, and they got the main part. So it made out okay.
It's a nice place to live. It's a beautiful spot right here, and
Yes, it is. This Pleasant View Farm.
I wanted. Who named it? Did you name it, or who named it
No.
Pleasant View?
Pleasant View Farm, because I don't know how come, but you look towards Canada, and you see it's a pleasant view, all right.
And Edna described how to get here, and she described the house in the barn. She says it'll say Pleasant View, so you'll know you're there. And I said, "Yep, here we are, Calvin."
Yeah, Pleasant View Farm. So it was. I always liked it here.
So did you people farm here when you came here? Was your husband a farmer?
Oh yes, I think so, if I remember right.
Now tell me a little bit about. Were you excited when they told you that you were going to be in the parade?
Well, I don't know, but I didn't see much of it because I was way in the front.
I heard you waved a lot, though. I know
Oh, yes.
you're not very tall, but people could see you waving up in that
Oh
car in the
yes,
front.
yes, yes. I got a nice. I'll show you.
All right, she's going to go bring us some. Look at this. She jumped right out of that chair. But she's not even 100 yet. We'll have to come back here next year. Now, she's got a plaque. All right, get over here and show us your plaque. Let me see. Says, Chateaugay Bicentennial, 1799-1999. This certificate is presented to Mrs. Margaret Dupree. Special recognition of outstanding achievement and participation in the 200th birthday celebration. Chateaugay, New York, the oldest town in Franklin County.
Yeah.
Huh?
Right.
Now tell me this, Margaret, do you remember parades when you were a little girl? Remember going to parades at all?
Oh, we used.
I bet you did go to parades when you were a little girl.
We used to go to parades in Chateaugay.
I bet you.
Oh, I think so.
And I even heard today there were horse races right down the main street of Chateaugay many years ago. That's what I heard. And there was a fair here too, wasn't there? Chateaugay Fair was here.
I can't remember that.
I bet you could.
Malone.
Malone Fair too.
We used to go to Malone Fair.
Did you enjoy that too?
Oh yes. We used to walk around and it was good.
It's a lot of fun. Well, you've got a wonderful plaque there and some really great memories of the Bicentennial Parade, huh?
And I got some flowers besides.
Oh, you got some nice flowers and some pictures of puppy dogs and family members. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if Kelly's in there anywhere. I was looking for those pictures.
Danny.
Oh, that's Danny?
That's Danny.
Mm.
Cancer, poor Danny.
Oh, boy. I wonder.
Right side.
Oh, you got some great photographs here.
There's a
Oh,
parade.
there's the parade. Pictures of the parade. Calvin, I don't know if you can get a picture of it. Yeah,
Pretty
see?
close, probably.
So when's the last time you saw Kelly? Has she stopped in to see you once in a while?
Yes, she does, but I haven't seen Kelly, and it's at night, you know, when she comes.
So I'm going to have to tell her to stop down here and see her great-grandma, and I will tell her today when I get back to the office that I came to interview you,
Oh, God.
and I'm going to tell her I kept you from eating your lunch.
Yes,
George, his name is, that delivered your lunch. Huh?
George Douglas. George Douglas, yeah.
Oh, hey, Mr. George Douglas has got Meals on Wheels, huh?
His wife is related with me.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Rose Douglas, yeah.
You're probably related to a lot of people around here.
I got her picture here somewhere.
Oh, my goodness. You got a lot of things here. This is a comfortable little house.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Well, listen, I'm not going to keep you from your lunch anymore,
Oh, that's okay.
but I just want to tell you what a thrill it is to come and say hello to the oldest citizen of Chateaugay. And you're spry enough so we know you're going to be around here for at least another 10 or 15 more years.
Oh, I doubt it.
I bet you will.
know.
With that
You
wonderful
never
sense
know.
of humor, you're going to be around here
Never
for a
know.
long time to come.
You never know. That we never know, eh?
We never know.
We never know.
Whatever happens.
What happens, happens.
One day at a time.
Yes, that's right.
But you feel pretty good, don't you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I feel good.
I love it.
Yeah,
You're a terrific lady.
a good appetite.
Do you really?
Yes.
Yeah, that's no problem with me either. See this? I have no trouble eating good food. My wife's a very, very good cook.
She's a good cook.
Oh, she's a great cook.
That's good.
I learned how to eat back on the farm myself.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You work hard and you eat hard.
Yeah.
You have steak and eggs for breakfast, boy.
Oh, that I can't eat breakfast.
You don't like breakfast?
I have my coffee and that's it.
Really?
But I have a good dinner and good supper. Oh, yes.
Not too many snacks in between?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I do too.
Yeah, sometimes.
I like fruit myself.
Yeah, yeah.
I like apples. We went up to Hemingford, Quebec a few days ago, and they gave us some apples from the orchard, and they were delicious.
Ain't they nice? Yes.
I love the
yes,
apples.
Yes, we always do.
Well, Margaret, thanks so much for allowing us to barge into your house and talk to you today. You're a wonderful lady.
Thank you.
I hope you're around for a long, long time to come, okay?
Thank you very much.
We'll see you later. And thank you for joining us for another program that ends up at a perfect place called Pleasant View Farms. And who knows where we're going to be next